Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday live streaming session once again. We are here, myself and Kwame, bringing to you topical issues in Africa that we need to think about. It's not also what's happening in the continent. Sometimes also we need to think ahead what we should do as an African and what should our organization, the biggest Pan-African organization like African Union should do, in this changing world. So myself and Kwame are here to discuss on that. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet, and greetings and regards to all those people who are watching, our viewers, our dear viewers. We want to thank you for keeping with us here at Connect Africa, and Mahlet yourself, thank you very much for organizing, this space so that we can be here to dialogue about our continent. Today, as you said, we are here to deliberate on the role of the African Union. Absolutely, in this period in which we are in, we have seen a lot of things happening today around the world. In this world which we are living, of course, the COVID which happened, we saw the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. We have seen the Ukraine war, and then we have seen the issues that are going on in the South China Sea. Even recently, President Macron just left China, and China was carrying out drills because of Taiwan. Taiwan is making attempts of becoming uh, uh, an independent state. Yet, throughout history, the Chinese consider this a Chinese territory. And so we ask ourselves today, uh, within this dispensation, or what President Xi Jinping recently called changes happening in the world today, they have not happened in the last 100 years. This period, what is the role, or what should be the role of the African Union? What should be the role of the African Union in this period? We see our continent, of course, also facing a lot of challenges. Militarization, the United States has come in. We have seen the Western diplomats invading the continent. The US, we have seen it released its diplomats across the continent. Even though they have come with nothing, they have not come with a lot, but they have come to invade the continent. They want something. So this, we look at it as a challenge. There is also opportunities, of course. There's opportunities that we have seen countries like Mali, Burkina Faso throw off French neocolonialism across their space, the various spaces, and they have even made attempts at unifying. We have seen Mali and Burkina Faso try to unify, make attempts at federating and creating a federation. If you remember, in the 1950s and 60s, during the formation of the Guinea, Ghana, Mali union, which they had attempted to create the United States of Africa, when Guinea and Ghana and Mali came together, Mali was still instrumental. And so historically, Mali has been at the forefront of the struggle of creating a union, because it understands the importance of the United States of Africa. So in all these events that are happening across the globe, what should be the role of the African Union? We speak as African citizens. What are our expectations of the African Union? The threats of nuclear war with the Russia, Ukraine, what should be the role of the African Union? Is it enough for the African Union to just sit? And when I talk about the African Union gets its power from the heads of state. So if I'm talking about the African Union, then I'm talking about the heads of state. So the questions we are asking here today and deliberating about, me and Mahlet and one of our comrades, who's called Hadi, the coordinator of Worldwide Africans Rising, an organization which is engaged in pushing for a borderless Africa. A petition is going around actually, and they are pushing for a borderless Africa. We are working together, of course, with Connect Africa. So he is also here, even though he has challenges with the network. Is a renowned Pan-Africanist worldwide, and he has been the fighter general of the Economic Fighters League of Ghana also. So we will be here to deliberate. And once again, we want to thank you, all those ones who are watching, who are with us this evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are across the globe. So we want to thank you and welcome you once again to Connect Africa as we deliberate on the role of the African Union in our generation, in this dispensation, in today's changing world order, as President Xi Jinping called it recently. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. You really have given us the highlights of our today's main topic, what we are going to dive in and bring that Pan African perspective to us, as that should be what we should be worrying and try to achieve. Before we go, I would like, as Kwame said, today we have a guest, our Pan Africanist brother, brother Hardy, but he has a challenge of internet, but if he might come in at any given time. So that's really a great honor for us. To give you a Pan African perspective, we bring Pan African people to this platform. As you said, Kwame, I am hearing my echo for some reason. Let me see. Yeah. So, as President Jinping, or the President of China, said when in his visit to Moscow with President Putin, that we are really at a turning point, and then this change that's happening in the world would not have happened in 100 years. And we see conflicts everywhere globally, power conflicts, new economic fronts have been formed, uh, countries that have been enemies for decades also have become friends with each other unexpectedly. Countries that have been partners also, we saw that going on their separate ways. I'm referring, for example, Saudi Arabia and the United States. So in general, the geopolitical shift is really something unprecedented. And what the question for us is, as an African, of course, what should be the role of the African Union in today's changing world order, also for Africans as well. And so before we go and into that in detail, before we go, so it looks like,
Mahlet, just mute him, and then
okay,
we'll
okay.
continue forward.
Yeah, so Kwame, what I would like to do is actually, we create awareness, as you know, in this platform. Before we dive to our main topic, it's really important, before we talk about our expectation or suggestion to the African Union, let's remind ourselves, for what reason actually the African Union was created, or the then organization of African unity. Yeah, so just remind us quickly, then that will help us to relate also when we talk about what should be the African Union role. Back to you, Kwame.
Thank you, Mahlet. Can you hear me very well?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's important that before we say, like you mentioned, you rightly mentioned, before we go ahead to put out our expectations to understand where the African Union is today, and then the expectations which we have of it as an organization, regardless of whether it has been successful or it has been a failure, as many may think or may have in mind. It is important for us actually to understand where the organization is coming from and how it was created. This organization, it was created in 1963, and during that period it was called the Organization of African Unity. But it was born out of the relentless and tireless work uh, of a man called Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, uh, after he gained Ghana's independence in 1957 in March, had seen the necessity of having Africa unified, because he had seen the new rising power, which was the United States after the World War II. So Nkrumah saw the need of unifying Africa into a civilizational state, because we as Africans, we have been a civilizational people. And by the civilizational people, I mean that we have accomplished numerous things in the past. You can talk of all the histories. Civilizations like Ethiopia has been around for the last 3,000 years. But going back even before uh, the Europeans came here to learn. So Nkrumah was borrowing on this history, to affirm that we can build something stronger out of this. We can build, a stronger, unified Africa, basing on the foundations of the achievements that we achieved in the past, whether you're talking about in Timbuktu, whether you're talking about in Kush, in Abyssinia, whether you're talking about, in Kemet in Egypt, whether you're talking about in Benin, okay, all these in Songhai, all these civilizations, or whether you're talking about Zimbabwe, the great Zimbabwe. So it was important to aggregate these achievements and replicate them and repeat them. So Nkrumah immediately started pushing for a united Africa. But it is after he had also been to the United States and seen how the United States, the various states, came together to form the United States of America. And then he had seen the Soviet Union, how it was created, after the revolution. He had seen India coming together, and India now is a super state almost. He had seen China, how it had been unified also in 1949. So Nkrumah envisioned that in this era in which we have emerged as Africans, we cannot be able to compete if we do not unify as Africans. If we are not unified as a people, then we will not be able to compete with the rest of the world, whether it is militarily and economically. And this has been proved, it has already been proved right now that the gigantic states are the ones which are now growing rapidly. You can talk of states like India. I mean, you can talk of India, you can talk of China, okay? You can talk of the United States. You can talk of Europe, how it has unified ever since Europe unified, into a European Union, even before, by the time Europe started talking about the ideas of unifying into the European Union, Nkrumah had already seen the need of Africa uniting. Okay, so Europe actually came to copy what Nkrumah wanted for Africa. And Nkrumah, of course, faced a lot of challenges. So the formation of the Organization of African Unity was a compromise, because during that struggle, the people who existed during that period, the heads of state, they developed differences amongst themselves, and so we got the Casablanca group and we got the Monrovia group. So it was a difference in approach that developed during that period, that to the point that by the time we reached 1963, the only organization which would come out, it was the Organization of African Unity, which was formed as a loose state, as a compromise, because Nkrumah was pushing for a union government now. But let me put this and make this also very clear. Without Nkrumah, the Organization of African Unity would not have been formed. The Organization of African Unity as an organization, without the insistence of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the organization would not have been formed, because he is the one who pushed so hard. And because he pushed so hard, the fear of a United States of Africa, an immediate United States of Africa, led the various people who were against an immediate formation of a United States of Africa to retreat into the formation of Organization of African Unity, because they feared an immediate formation of a union government of Africa. So if actually Nkrumah originally was pushing for the formation of Organization of African Unity, we would not have gotten anything. That is to say the truth. We would not have gotten anything, because we would have compromised then to nothing if Nkrumah was pushing for a loose organization of states. So this is where I believe that Nkrumah, without him, we would not have gotten the Organization of African Unity. Now, when he was overthrown, of course, in 1966, the organization went on to achieve certain objectives, which they had set it up, out for. They had set out certain objectives for it. For example, the decolonization, because when it was formed and Nkrumah wanted it for a union government and they failed to unify it immediately, then they turned it into an organization which will pursue the decolonization process. And that decolonization process, apart from Sahrawi Republic, which remained behind, by 1994, South Africa was the last part to be decolonized. It was decolonized, apart from Sahrawi Republic, which is remaining even up to today, that Morocco is still colonizing. That part is the only part on the African continent which right now is not decolonized and is not a free state. So by 2002, the organization was reviewed, and during the SAT declaration of 1999, which happened in Libya, which President Muammar Gaddafi convened, the African heads of state agreed to transform the Organization of African Unity into the African Union, which we have today. And so this had to come with the reforms of the organization, and he pushed rapidly that we should form a single military. Of course, again, he was accused, he was accused of wanting to be powerful, wanting to become the president of the United States, and all those accusations which come with wanting to unify Africa, just like how Nkrumah also was accused in 1963, because they say that it is because he's greedy for power, that is why he's pushing for a United States of Africa. So the OAU was transformed into the African Union. In 2002, those reforms started taking shape. The Organization of African Unity was transformed to African Union. Those reforms and new organizations like the African Union Commission, Pan-African Parliament, all those were established. So when they were established, then we had the African Union as a new organization, which was now supposed to pursue the ideals and ideas, the original ideas, the unfinished business of integrating Africa politically and economically. If you go back to 1963, in one of his iconic speeches, which Nkrumah gave, he said that Africa must unify politically before anything else. If we are talking about unifying Africa, we have to unify politically before economically. And it is unfortunate that today, in some cases, you find that we are pursuing actually economic objectives like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area before even we have spoken about a united African government, of course, which is unfortunate in some cases. But these are the things which we are going to discuss today. We want to see, as the African Union also achieved its objectives, and where has it failed? And today, what should be, its role? What are our expectations as Africans, as the African people, as African civil society? Because we connect Africa, we belong to the African civil society. We are the African citizens now. What are our expectations? And that is what we are going to look at. So briefly, Mahlet, allow me to stop there. This is the history of the organization briefly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kwame. Indeed, that background was needed before we jump to and talk about, our expectation or suggesting what the African Union's role should be in today's changing of the world. I mean, with all the changes that we're having. There are some still, before we go to the main point, I want to throw one more question. So the very reason that the African Union, the Organization of African Unity in 1963 was established was, out of a need to also to decolonize countries that were colonized by European countries, but that has been done. And so they transformed that organization to the African Union by setting some agendas also that was in 2002, and then in 2013 also we have Agenda 2063. With all these things, what are the major things that the African Union has achieved so far that probably will help us or be a bridge, to understand why the African Union is on the sideline and needs to do more? So if you can highlight what are the achievements so far for this organization. Keep that in mind, and I would like to give not a shout out, but acknowledge some of the comments that has been here. Thank you very much, really, for our viewers who are here, who bear with us. And for believing in us. AU is okay. There is one thing that hit me really. Pan-Africanism is a failed project. So I think this is shared by so many.
I will respond.
I will give you the floor. Okay, some of them are okay. You are a gear shifters. Thank you, Ashra. AU is funded by European, definitely. Our leaders have refused to contribute for the programs. That's why we see most of the programs are hijacked by European Union and other Western countries. Right Reaction 77 says African nations needs to focus internally. How are you going to talk about African unity when we don't even have stable nations? Again, that is shared by Tanki Bot, who says that China is 90% Han. That's a tribe, probably. I don't know. So America was mostly Northern European. Africa has 3,000 tribes. We cannot, nor do we want to become one nation. So they are referring to tribalism, of course. The others are good comments commending us. So quickly, if you can reflect on that for them, that would be good. Okay, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Mahlet. Of course, it's important, to answer people's questions and respond. But if if you can put those questions down so that we can finish, and then at the end we'll attend to all those questions so that we finish the program. We don't want to interrupt the middle of the program. So let's finish it. Let me first go straight to the question which you asked me about the achievements and of course the failures of the African Union. uh, I think on the achievement side, all of us, of course, as you have read in the comments, will agree that the achievements have not been many, even though it has not. So, it has done something. So when we say the achievements have not been many, it doesn't mean that there has not been any achievement. It means that there has been some achievements, but probably those achievements have fallen below. They are below the expectations. They are less than the achievements are less than the expectations which we had. So one of those achievements, like I mentioned, was the decolonization. The helping of the decolonization process. Of course, we were helped by countries like Russia, which was during that period called the Soviet Union. We were helped by countries like Cuba, but in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, the Africans, especially in the East African region, even the West, they coordinated together to fight against the Portuguese in Mozambique. They worked together, Africans worked together under the the Organization of African Unity to help to decolonize countries like Angola, to decolonize Zimbabwe, to decolonize Namibia, to decolonize South Africa. That was the last battleground. It was South Africa, and majority of the African countries actually contributed. When you're talking about Nigeria, if you are talking about Tanzania, if you're talking about Ethiopia, if you are talking about Uganda, all these contributed in decolonizing South Africa because they were coordinating their efforts. So that is one of the things which you can count and say, oh, this was an achievement. This was an achievement by the African Union or the Organization of African Unity. And one of those achievements actually is recent. There's a recent achievement that was coined, whereby the African Union presided over the over the agreement that was the solution, that was reached in South Africa and Pretoria when Ethiopia was going through a crisis, and there was rebels in the northern part of the country who were disturbing the peace of the country, the stability of the country. The African Union presided over this peace agreement that was signed, and the rebels have been disarmed, and the African Union, lo and behold, gave back power to the federal government in Ethiopia. So you could see or say that this is also a great achievement, and is a movement towards the right direction. You can say that the organization is moving in the right direction. The other achievement which I can think of, I think it was the period when President Uhuru Kenyatta came to power with his vice or deputy president William Ruto, who is the current president of Kenya. During that period, the ICC wanted to indict them on issues which the racist ICC, of course, claimed that they were human rights violations in Kenya, even though Bush and Blair, who violated the human rights across the globe, had not been indicted anywhere. So they rallied the African Union, and all the Africans were able to support President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy president, William Ruto. And these charges by the ICC were dropped, and they left the President Uhuru Kenyatta alone. So these are some of the achievements which you can talk of. And you can talk of the establishment of the Pan-African Parliament in South Africa, which we have in South Africa. Okay, that is also a very important step, because when the Organization of African Unity was there, we did not have the the Pan-African Parliament, which is in South Africa. I know that many people may not know that even we have the Pan-African Parliament. So it's important that people, get educated on some of these things, which the African Union, of course, has achieved in that area. And as we are seeing, also, it is also starting to try to implement what it is calling the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is the towards the Agenda 2063. Also, it was able under Madame Dlamini Zuma. It was able, who was the chairperson of the African Union Commission during that period, it was able also to draw up the agenda for the African continent, which is the Agenda 2063. So these, in brief, are the achievements of the African Union, which I can talk of. And when we go to the failures, or the failures of the organization itself, also those ones, I think that we will mention them. Let me give it back to you, Mahlet, the microphone, before we go to the failures of the organization.
No, thank you very much, Kwame. There is some hope, definitely. I mean, we always talk about, mostly as not only on this platform, but as an African, always the failure of the continent itself, and there is this. Just like we perceived what they misrepresented us in the mainstream media, a dark continent, not only in our skin color, which we aren't proud, but in terms of that, we are hopeless with all, the association with disease, conflict, war, tribalism, corrupted governments. Some of them are true, but are we all about that? And no, there are more things happening in the continent. There are successful people. Why they are so invested in us? Because they know that there is no life without Africa. So in everything you would see that they take a part. So that being said, now I'm gonna take you to our main topic tonight. You might mention the failure, as you said, before you answer that, but I'm going to throw our main question for today is that, so, in general, the African Union is all about, it's established in principle to defend the sovereignty of the continent, that territorial integrity and independence of its member states, to accelerate the political and socio-economic integration, and also promote and defend African common positions on issues of interest to the continent and its people. Now, this is where it brings us to today's topic. As the world is changing, that we are seeing major geopolitical shifts, and there are power conflicts in every sector globally. So what kind of the role the African Union should take, what position should it take, without really choosing A or B in this? I mean, it might be even more C or D, as we are seeing entering a multipolar power in the world. So what should be the role of the African Union in today's changing world order, and the Africans themselves, like us who are on the platform, and others? What can we contribute? How can we keep that interest? Yeah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. Uh, of course, I cannot talk about the expectations, our expectations of the African Union, without talking about the failures, because these failures are the source of our expectations. The expectations which we have of the African Union or what you have rightly called the role of the African Union, what should be. The word should in itself, it means that this is the expectations. The word should means there is expectations that are unfulfilled. So I cannot talk about the expectations that we have without connecting it to the failures of the organizations of the organization. I can call it even organizations because they are two now. They were two organizations now: Organization of African Unity, and then the African Union, or the AU itself. Uh, if you asked a question today, and you posed the question and said, "Has the African Union achieved its objectives?" I think many of us would say that it has not achieved. Has it achieved the objectives for which it was reformed? Because the formation of the African Union was a reform of OAU as a body. And more than 20 years down the line, we are still looking for those achievements, those core achievements. If you asked this organization, is it the organization which President Muammar Gaddafi pushed to, to integrate itself, even after, even 10 years, more than 10 years after his death in 2011? Is this the organization which President Muammar Gaddafi envisioned that would unify the continent, that would make the welfare of the people of the African continent better, would improve the lives of the African people? And the answer, of course, is no. Is this the organization which Dr. Kwame Nkrumah envisioned? Is this the continent is this the continent that he envisioned for the Africans when he fought for independence, starting with Ghana in 1957, and like we have mentioned and seen, that he fought for the formation of the OAU in 1963? Is this the Africa that he envisioned? And the answer is no. So if the answer is no to both of these questions, and if the answer is no, that the expectations of these two great men were not met, then definitely it means that, the OAU and the African Union as organizations have not met their expectations. And so it is on these expectations that we are going to base, that we are going to stand. These expectations are going to be the foundation upon which we as a people, as Africans, are going to stand. All here at Connect Africa, we are going to stand to spell out what we think that should be the role of the African Union. And thank you very much, Mahlet, actually, for organizing this program. This program, actually, for those who are watching, will be followed up by a webinar in which we will call the various Pan-Africanists across the globe. And from that webinar that we are going to hold and deliberate on the role of the African Union in today's changing world order, we will come up with a paper that will be delivered to the African Union itself, to the regional bodies, and the various African heads of state, because the African heads of state, they are the ones who make up the African Union. They are the ones who give it direction. They are the ones who mold the policy which governs and directs the African Union where to go. So we will come up with a paper from this webinar and deliver it to these various presidents, the African Union and the regional bodies of the African continent, with our expectations, of course. Now, why would I say the African Union has been a failure? Even though I've mentioned that it has achieved some things, because one of the things we are taught is that when you are looking at something, you need to look at both sides, because all all things that are existent, whether it's bodies, whether it's human beings, whether it's organizations, have two opposing sides, or what we call dialectics. That if someone has some bad things, they also have some good things, and you need to look at them and contrast them before you make a final conclusion. So we have looked at the good things, of course, which the African Union has delivered to us, but we will look at also the failures of the African Union. The African Union as an organization, what we are seeing today is that it has turned itself into an NGO, like how you see the United Nations, where rules are disregarded by, by the members. We have seen the UN, the United Nations, that, for example, in 2000, 2011, 2000, it was 2003, they went and attacked Iraq. The United States and its European allies, without the permission of the United Nations. So what we are seeing is that the African Union, an organization that is supposed to be reformed 20 years down the line, more than 20 years down the line, has turned itself into an organization which is like an NGO, a non-government organization, whereby people now are going to pursue careers, people who do not believe in the ideals and the principles upon which the organization was formed. It has become a place where careerists, people who want to fulfill their economic thirst or economic hunger, now they are going, to fulfill, to quench that hunger. That the organization, instead of being a revolutionary organization, has turned into an NGO. People are just pursuing careers over there, and they don't believe at all in the principles and the ideals of Pan-Africanism. And when you go there and talk about Pan-Africanism, some of them even they laugh at you. And this could be the reason. This could be one of the reasons why this organization has not achieved its objectives for the last 20 years since it was formed. Because it was formed originally in 1963 on Pan-African ideals, the ideals and the principles that we are looking to unify Africa into a political union, not an economic union, but a political union. So the organization has turned into a careerist organization where people are going to pursue careers, whether they believe in African unity, whether they know anything about Pan-Africanism, whether they don't know. And the majority of them, as we have seen, they don't know about anything about Pan-Africanism, but they are in the organization to quench that thirst, their economic thirst. And so this has been one of the failures, actually, or the causes, one of the causes of the failure of the organization. Trust me, Mahlet, I've attended some of the meetings of this organization, on whether it is online meetings, and when you hear their language, which they are speaking, they are so much of, the principles and the ideals of Pan-Africanism. They are talking about sustainability. They are talking the NGO language, which doesn't give us the empty language of the Western world. So you can see that they are talking about sustainability, sustainable development goals, things which you see that are not going to produce anything for us. Not that the sustainable development goals are bad if they were achieved, but because the Millennium Development Goals were not achieved, then you have to turn this thing into sustainable development goals. So this is the basis upon which we are saying that these are empty, rhetorics from the UN and the Western world. So this is the language that people are using at the African Union, and it is unfortunate. It becomes very unfortunate. Now, the position of Africans, number two, the position of the Africans on the international stage has not improved. The respect for Africans as a people has not improved. We have seen the condition of Africans in the Mediterranean who are drowning, and in some cases, we hear that the Europeans base in Europe and they drown some of the boats that are trying to cross the Atlantic from Africa, to Europe, because they look at these as dangerous unwanted migrants, as unwanted niggers, as unwanted black people. So they decide to drown some of these boats. So this shows you that the position of the African people has not improved, since independence, since we gained independence, even though it had improved slightly after our revolutionary leaders who led us to independence. Number three, the security situation on the African continent has not improved. You remember that it was said that 2020 was supposed to be the year of silencing the guns. So if you are talking about silencing the guns, and we still have these numerous conflicts across the globe. In Somalia, we have conflicts in northern Nigeria. We have now, yesterday, about 40 people were killed in Burkina Faso. We have conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have conflicts in the Central African Republic. We have instability. And to wrap it up all, when it comes to conflicts and insecurity, we have the invasion of the United States of our continent. So on the security aspect, you see that the African Union has still failed to the extent that the Europeans can come into our continent. We have conflicts in Libya. We have not spoken about that, which was started by Europeans. The Europeans now can invade our continent and put troops, on our continent without the knowledge of the African Union, without the approval of the African Union, without the approval of all the heads of state. Even though the various heads of state refused, that the AFRICOM or Africa, U.S. Africa Command, which is based in Stuttgart, when it was being pushed to come to Africa, they refused at a certain point that it should not be brought to Africa. But they have failed to follow up and stop the United States and stop the Europeans from militarizing our continent and causing chaos on our continent. So on the security aspect, we see that also they have failed in that aspect. When you go to the economic aspect, of course, the economic aspect, when you look at what is happening in Ghana, what is happening, in South Africa, people are demonstrating on the streets because of poor economic conditions. When you look at what is happening in Kenya, because things are not working economically. When you look at what is happening in Nigeria, when you look at what is happening in Senegal, when you look at what is happening in Ivory Coast, when you look at what is happening in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, these people are dissatisfied with the current economic system. And our leaders have insisted that we should continue to operate under, the arm, under the shadow of an European economic system, instead of exploring other alternative economic systems like what China, and the Asian tigers have done. Many of the African leaders have refused. And so in this aspect also, we see that the African Union has not really achieved much on the political space, on the political level, because the organization also has been turned into a careerist organization, sort of an NGO. You can see that now the organization is no more pursuing the objectives of Pan-Africanism. And the original objective of Pan-Africanism is the unification of Africa politically, not merely economically, but starting, it has to be unified politically. Now, the other, a failure which we see is that the African Union, even though it established the sixth region of the African diaspora, to which all African diaspora and people of African descent, belong, it has failed to follow up. It has failed to mobilize the African diaspora. It is not enough for the African Union to just establish the sixth region of the African diaspora and put it on autopilot and say, now it is finished. It is important to follow up with the mobilization. And we see that this failure of mobilization of people of African descent has not done enough, to send a clear warning to countries like the United States, which are violating the rights and killing, the people of African descent on United States soil. the African Union has to send a clear message which is signed by all African heads of state, and they say that this behavior cannot be tolerated. It cannot be tolerated by the African Union. It cannot be tolerated by Africans all across the globe. It cannot be tolerated by Africans on the continent. A clear message, a clear, a warning has to be sent to the United States that if it cannot address the grievances, if it cannot release people of African descent from incarceration and prisons where it has imprisoned them, if it cannot stop killing them, if it cannot stop violating the rights of the people of African descent, then it should be banned. The United States and its diplomats should be banned from stepping on African soil. I think this has to be sent as a clear message, to the United States and its European allies. So with that, Mahlet, I think let me just take a little breather. But this is what, before I come back with the role, our expectations, what we think that should be the role of the African Union in today's dispensation and how the world is rapidly changing. Let me first take a breather before I come back with that, and let me give you back the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Kwame. Really, I was gonna say, oh, then what is left? We are hopeless if AU has failed with all this. What kind of position it can take, in the face of the world? I don't know. That will be something that we are going to explore with you. But I'm gonna go and read the comments. That will. Okay, yeah. So EZD is our regular viewer or audience here. Yes, Kwame, Western powers have been relentless at trying to hold back any progress in Africa and causing instability throughout the continent. But now things are changing. Yeah, that's the mysterious thing. Okay, things are changing. So what is the African Union changing from its habit, from its way of doing? This is all engineered. Again, EZD is saying this is all engineered by the West, but the AU must stand to hell up and demand answers. The AU need to find its voice quickly. Yeah, that's a positive one. Okay, the US often threaten with financial sanctions as a way, but the AU can overcome that problem. Let me see if I missed anything. I think that is so much of it. Yeah, okay. Barrington Brown isn't Haile Selassie is the founder of the. There are. It's not only one person. More than one person has founded the organization, including Emperor Haile Selassie of that time. Yeah. So, Kwame, if you have taken some things that energized you for the next few minutes, back to you. We all are, eager or excited to hear these suggestions for the African Union or as an African wherever we are. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you once again, Mahlet. So our expectations and what we have called the role of the African Union in this era, in the new era in which we are living, or what President Xi Jinping of China calls the new era. Okay, our role. What should the role of the of the African Union be in the new era? So is best on the problems and failures that we have diagnosed as African people. And we are saying that the African Union cannot continue to be run, by careerists, by simply organizing interviews based on qualifications, but those interviews at the African Union should be based on conviction. People should be employed both, based on both qualifications and convictions and understanding of the history of the continent, of the history of the organization itself, of the total conviction that they are going to work, and total swearing, like how people swear before the constitution and say, I swear by the constitution that I will protect, such and such a country. I swear that I will push and fight for the unification of the African continent, politically starting and economically. And so these are the expectations for us. These are the expectations for us. These are the expectations in this era, because without a unified Africa, we cannot compete in this world. We cannot compete anymore when gigantic nations, when nations have continued to come together to form, powerful blocks. We have seen NATO is a group of countries who have come together militarily, and they are tormenting the world. A group of countries who came together in the 60s, and now they are tormenting the world. They can go anywhere in the world and bomb. And so why would the African Union, why would the African states not come together to provide security for the African continent and expel all the French, forces who are on the continent? France is a very small country. Why would we continue to allow French colonialism on the African continent? Why would we continue to allow the United States troops and armies and military bases on the African continent? And for that matter, why would we continue to allow any country to have a military base on the African continent? And that starts with the diagnosis which we have made and said that the African Union, the people being employed at the African Union should be based on their qualifications should be based on academics and conviction, total conviction towards the ideals, the original ideals of Pan-Africanism, towards the original principles of Pan-Africanism and their understanding. This is what we believe. On the second point, we believe that the African Union has to continue to play an important role. It has to come out of the timidity, because the organization has coiled into timidity to some point, that the African heads of state, they have not only neglected the security situation of the continent, they have not only neglected the security situation of the continent, but they have also neglected to represent Africa on the international stage. We are seeing the war in Ukraine, for example, between Russia and Ukraine, in what Russia called a special military operation, which is almost similar to what the United States did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Or even what was in Afghanistan was even much worse, and what happened in Iraq was much worse. These were invasions. But the African heads of state have not played their role on the international stage to represent Africa and its position. And it is very dangerous. And what has this resulted into? It has resulted into Europeans, because the African heads of state have not come out to represent the Africans and represent strongly the position of Africa and the Africans through, of course, the African Union. What is needed is just to write all of them to write letters to the African Union Commission and put up the position of the African heads of state and say, this is where we are standing on the issue of Ukraine. And we are saying that let the United States and Europe stop pouring weapons into Ukraine, because Russia has agreed to negotiate. So if the United States doesn't want that, if it doesn't want to agree with the position of the African Union, then it should stop coming to Africa. It should be point clear. It should be banned from coming to Africa. I think we need to put our foot down as Africans. So if there is a nuclear war which is going to happen in Ukraine, and God forbid, if a nuclear war happens in Ukraine, the United States is not going to be affected. It's not going to be affected as we who are close to Russia and Ukraine. The African continent, our people in the northern part of Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, which are very close here, they are the ones who will be affected by the nuclear dust that is likely to come, from this war. So the African Union and African heads of state need to stop being negligent. And they need to voice out there. They need to come out and represent the African people. This is the only way we will gain some respect on the international stage. And the African Union is not playing that position. When we look at what is happening in the South China Sea, it's the same situation that the United States and its allies have continued to provoke China, even though the United States has agreed in the past to the one China policy, whereby China has absolute authority over the territory of Taiwan. They have continued to provoke China and disrespect the agreements, which they themselves have agreed to in the past, about 3 agreements, which the agreements which re-established the relationships between China and the United States and the Western world. They have continued to disrespect these agreements and provoke a dangerous nuclear war in the South China Sea. And the African Union is sitting down, is not mentioning anything. The African heads of state are sitting down, they are not mentioning anything. And so we are saying that this should be the role of the African Union today. Not to sit down, but to understand the principles on which the African Union was formed and come out and speak about the problems that are happening across the globe. President Xi and President Putin, they have mentioned that the world is changing. The changes we are seeing today have not been seen in 100 years. And so the African Union has to jump within that pace. It has to follow that tempo. It has to jump within and follow the events that are happening, across the globe. And that is as it has to do with the geopolitical situation of the world as it is going right now. When it comes to the economic front, of course, the African Union is working on the Agenda 1963, but there is lacking urgency. Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but this organization Nkrumah mentioned from 1963 and various heads of state like Thomas Sankara, if we do not unify politically, there's no way we can pursue economic, objectives. We cannot pursue economic objectives if we still have the United States with the military bases littered all over across the African continent and destabilizing the various African countries. It has to be shut down with its Europeans, its group of Europeans and bandits. It has to be shut down. So the African Union has to play its role, and it has to be insistent. It has to be strong in playing this role. Otherwise, as an organization, it will continue to disappoint we as the Africans. But we think that this should be the role of the African Union, to unify the continent and in urgency, to play its role on the international stage through the African heads of state, to mobilize the African heads of state, either way, even though the African heads of state are the ones who give it power to act. But it also, the African Union Commission has the duty to go back to the heads of state and ask them, what do you think about this issue? Can we form a unified front when it comes to the Ukraine issue? Can we form a unified front when it comes to the issue of the South China Sea? Can we form a unified, front when it comes to the issue of Saudi Arabia and Iran coming together, that they are forming, they are agreeing to bring back peace and stability in the Middle East? Can we raise our voice and give our support? This is what the African Union is supposed to be. Because this silence is what has led to the Europeans to become arrogant and come and lecture to us, because they think that we don't know what is going on across the globe. They think that we don't know the chaos that they are causing, the death and the destruction they are causing across the globe. And so they continue to come and try to teach us, to try to lecture to us about democracy, even though we have not invited them. So the African Union has to take its position. The African Union, if I may add, it has to lead in the protection of the rights of the people of African descent, whether it is Haiti, where the United States and Canada are bullying the people of Haiti, who are people of African descent. The African Union has to raise a voice. If it is the people, the African people in the Mediterranean Sea who are being killed over there, who are drowning, the African Union has to raise its voice. And it has to be raised, it has to raise its voice in a very assertive way, in a very assertive manner. Whether it is the killing of the African people and the people of African descent in the streets of the United States, where we have seen George Floyd, Sandra Bland, and the majority of Africans being killed, like Amadou Diallo, who was killed in the streets of the United States, the shootings of people of African descent, the incarceration and the arresting, unwarranted arresting of the African people in the United States on trumped up charges because of racism, the racist judicial system in the United States, the racist, security system in the United States, the African Union and the African heads of state, this is their role. This should be their role in this changing world order that we are experiencing today. And they have to be assertive. The African Union has to be assertive in attending to these responsibility, or what we have called its roles. So with that being said, Mahlet, allow me to end on that note, and I will let the audience, continue with their comments, and also to reflect on what we have spoken, and also to tell them that we are not only talking about these things, but we are on the ground. Like our brother who was supposed to be with us here today, who is called Hadi Yakubu, who is the leader and coordinator of Africans Rising, an organization which is carrying out a petition on the ground also of a borderless Africa. It has a petition which is similar to the petitions which we are also running. We are also running petitions for a single passport. We are also running petitions of a united Africa. We are also running petitions for a single currency and a petition for a single military. So these are the things which we are also doing on the ground. We are not merely here, to talk about events and how they are affecting Africa and what we think the African Union should do, but we are also engaged on the ground in mobilizing our people towards the new Africa that we envision within our generation. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you so much, Kwame. Thank you so much. Really, uploads. I mean, I'm sure the audience are joining me in uploading you. Thank you, really. That was the role of the African Union in today's changing world order 101 by Kwame Gonza. Yeah, just to reflect on, while you were talking about the last points, how African Union should stand on its feet and stop being on the sideline and own matters that affects it and its people. For example, you mentioned the war, Ukraine versus Russia, because God forbid if it happens, what they talk about, the Ukraine war, the nuclear war, then it will be actually Africa that will be affected rather than the US who is fueling it. But again, I go and ask myself, it has been that institution standing by the corner even for matters that are happening in the continent, and it just made me for a while pessimist, and then I kind of wake up and then no, like I always say, and I should stay by that principle, which is we cannot give up on this organization because it is ours. It doesn't matter, because this is the only hope that we can implement things as an African together for the unity of the continent. So we should own and understand that African Union is for the citizens of Africans. And it's important how you talked about as well. Somebody was also commenting here. Uh, uh, how you talk about the African Americans and elsewhere African descendants. When something happens, it could be sinking boat in Mediterranean Sea, or in prison in America, that it should talk about it, as the union, this African Union cannot afford actually to stand aside. And as Bomale say, for how long we stand aside and see when they kill our prophets and our leaders. So he fought with his guitar. He said, all I had is a redemption song, and he sang that. So yeah, I'm just reflecting on what you said, and it just made me pessimist with all that. Also, you listed a number of things that it failed, which is true. But then how can we rely on this organization fighting for the interest of its citizens going forward? Yes, we keep on talking about it. We're gonna send also at the end of this session, we will share it to the people that we know in the African Union and whom we think have a relation to the Union. Somewhere, someday it will fall to an important ear and try to make a change. Back to you, Kwame, if you want to say something on what I said.
Yeah, thank you for those additions, Mahlet. Like you rightly said, that sometimes you feel pessimistic because of the situation when you look at the situation. But I think it is my friend and my elder, Pierre Lumumba, Professor Pierre Lumumba, who always says that Pan-Africanism is not for the faint-hearted. And so when you see that even after being pessimistic, you still get the energy to continue, is because you have a very strong heart.
Because I
is
simply
Pan-Africanism.
cannot afford. I
Yes,
just can't afford sitting and looking at, it just, yeah.
yeah, so you cannot afford to sit down, and so that is what they mean when they say we should have pessimism. I think there's one philosopher who say that we should have pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. So what he means here is that if you are you are intellectually pessimistic, then you are willing to learn more, and you are optimistic at the same time. You have a will, your will, the willingness. So you are optimistic. Your will is optimistic. So you should have that pessimism of the intellect, and then you should have optimism of the will. You should be action oriented, and then you should be hungry to learn in order to be able to take action. So that is what it means. I think there is some people who raised some questions. I wanted to attend to some of those questions which people raised. There's a couple of people who raised questions.
Yeah.
Can you please bring them back for me? I think there is one person who asked about the African Union. So if you can raise them again.
One is, it's mainly about tribalism, as you like to call it. It's a cancer in the continent. Unfortunately, so it was John Reid, and I remember.
The first people, there was the first people who
Yeah,
asked the question about the African Union.
Africans nation need to focus internally. How are you going to talk about African unity when we don't even have a stable, when we don't even have stable nations? One said US is not comparable to Africa. It's the same person because uh, you mentioned that during the background for the formation of the African
Yes, so let me
and
answer
then
to that
the
question.
other one was China is 90% Han, America was mostly Northern European, Africa has 3,000 tribes. We cannot, nor do we, to become one nation. So this is the pessimism that
Okay. Yeah,
there.
so yes. So of course that's the pessimism. So the people who I think who speak when it comes to tribes is because people have turned the idea that our tribes are a liability, you see. So that is the problem, that people have turned our tribes into a liability instead of an asset, a means of celebration. So when we are talking about a united Africa, we are not talking about the abolition of our tribes. I think this I need to be, I need to make this very clear, because many people don't understand when we are talking about African unity. We are talking about the celebration of our diversity as Africans, whether it is 2,000 or 3,000 tribes. We are talking about the protection. Now, we are talking about the saving of these tribes so that they can celebrate their diversity and uniqueness, so that we can celebrate ourselves as Africans. So that is what we are talking about, that protection. But there is, on top of that, that we want security for these tribes so that they can celebrate themselves, so that our cultures will not be encroached on by the Western world. Like we have seen, they are spreading all kind of unwanted cultures on the African continent, which are coming from the West, whether it is bestiality, whether it is whether it's pedophilia, all these things which are encroaching onto our continent. How do we protect those cultures? We cannot protect them if we leave the continent open, to invaders like these who are coming in to disorganize it. And so that is where we are constantly pushing for a unified Africa. The unified Africa means that the things that we have in common, we want to work together in those aspects. And all of us need improved lives, of living. We need improved economic conditions as Africans. We need improved hospitals. We need improved education systems. All of us need security, whether it is from terrorists, whether it is from invaders like the United States and other Europeans, and all the other groups which may come that they want to take Africa's benefits. We need security. So the bodies that are going to carry out these activities of bringing the economic benefits to us, of bringing the security to us, of bringing the improved standards of living for us, these are the bodies which we want to form. And so that is why it was suggested, and even up to today, we still hold on to those principles, that we need to form a single military force for the African continent, for the protection of our tribes. Is not for the abolition of those tribes. Actually, the conditions which we are facing today are the ones which are destroying our tribes and that diversity which we have on the continent. So that single military would be for protection of those tribes, so that they can celebrate all across the continent, move all across the continent, and interact with each other, so that our cultures can mix and interact with each other and celebrate each other. So that is the purpose of the African Union. I mean, that's the purpose of a united African government, to attend to our economic needs, a single currency, so that we can move all across the continent. Okay, a single economic policy, a single foreign policy. We have seen that all the world bullies Africans, and they disrespect Africans because they enter the African continent and use the divide and rule method. But when we have a single foreign policy across the African continent, then these people, they cannot pass anywhere, because they have to deal with only one body of the Africans. And so the goods, the resources of our continent will be handled by a single body, which will be responsible for negotiating for higher prices for all our goods, whether it is agricultural goods, whether it is minerals in the ground. Then they will bring the goods to us as Africans, and our lives will improve. And so this is the basis of a united Africa that we talk about, a union government of African states, a single foreign policy, single currency, and a single economy. These are the basis. A single military. These are the basis. A single, foreign policy. These are the basis of a united Africa that we talk about every day, so that we have a borderless Africa, as Africans Rising right now is currently pushing, all across the continent. So these tribes which we have, these states which we have currently, all the problems which we are facing today, whether it is insecurity, instability, is because we have not unified, because we are still fighting, because we are still convincing others that the stability, the peace and stability of the African continent can only be achieved when we form a single military force. Because these foreigners who are already on the continent, they are already participating in destabilizing the African continent. And so if we have a single military, then there's no way foreigners can go to northern Ethiopia and manipulate the Tigray people and destabilize Ethiopia. There's no way they can go to Congo and destabilize Congo and pit one African against the other. There's no way they can go to Central African Republic or Somalia. There's no way they can go either to Eritrea, or they will go to Libya and destabilize over there, or Niger or Mali, because they will have one body to deal with. And that is the African military, and that is the single African foreign policy. So to answer those two questions, African unity in policy, which are important, and which policies which will bring the goods that are common to us, and which will help us to achieve our aspiration, our hopes and aspirations, which are universal in every sense, whether we are 2,000 or 3,000 tribes. That type of unity is what we are pursuing and what we are currently looking for. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Our viewer, I like it when they are really engaged. Just to strengthen on your point, CNS said African cultures have a similar basic structure, though each is unique. We can focus on the similarities to build upon, while celebrating the richness of each culture. There you go. Yeah, that's really well pointed. Easy D said nationalize all the national mineral mines. Definitely, that's also a point. I think we should come back one day on the issue of nationalization of our resources and privatization. The benefits. What are the challenges and opportunities when things are privatized? That being said, there was somebody how can we, it was Sinovia who asked, how can we as a people effectively change the AU, means the African Union? It seems the more we talk, the more ineffective we become. Do we need to have boots on the ground in order to be heard? Yeah, I think, I don't know, Kwame, if you want to come for this one, but I have
Yes.
something to say. Shall I
Yes,
go?
yes, so,
Yeah.
yes. So let me answer that question. So he asked, how can we change the African Union? Do we need boots on the ground? And of course, it is people like you and me who will change the African Union, and it starts with the work which we are doing here. On numerous occasions, we have called for support as a people, because we are already carrying out the work. You have seen the power of the media. It is important that you speak out every time you have a chance, but it is also important that you support the people who are on the front line. put up, sign those petitions. We have mentioned the petitions on numerous times. These are the steps which we are taking. These organizations, they don't change themselves, because the people who are in there, they are already privileged. They feel privileged, and they feel that they have to keep the system the way it is. So those changes are going to come from the ground. They are going to come from us. Like you rightly mentioned, that do we need to put the boots on the ground? Yes, we are the boots on the ground. And you are the boots on the ground already. And so we need to work together. You need to support all the organizations which you can, whether it is the Uhuru movement in the United States, which is led by Chairman Omali Yashitela, whether it is Africans Rising, which is fighting for a borderless Africa, whether it is Connect Africa, which is here. Make that contribution. Send us an email, reach out to us in the chat. We'll get back to you. If you want to contribute to us, we want to contribute to the work which we are doing. Sign those petitions which we are pushing. So this is the work which we are doing. So this has taken a very long time. So the independence, ever since we gained our independence, it has taken more than 60 years. So the effect, the complacency has taken more than 60 years now. If you add that to more than hundreds and centuries, more than 600 years of European domination. So you are not going to undo that within 2 days. So we have to continuously work on it. But we believe that within this generation, we should be able to achieve that objective of unifying Africa if we intensify our effort, because today we have so many advantages. We have so many resources, compared to our ancestors and what they had in 1945 or in 1791 during the Haitian revolution, which happened in San Domingo, or today's country, which is called Haiti, which fought for the stoppage of slavery, and slavery was stopped. And then the stoppage of colonialism, in 1945 up to 1957, when Nkrumah fought. We have more resources than those our ancestors, what they had, but they still fought and won. So we can do the same thing today. And this is the time, like we have mentioned, President Xi Jinping was recently in Moscow, and he mentioned that the changes we are seeing today have never happened in 100 years. So this is our faith. This is our belief that we are in the right time, and that is why we are also taking action. So you need also to take action by supporting the work which we are doing today. Thank you so much, Mahlet. I think I've answered the question for which the person asked.
Very, very definitely, because she said, okay, I just say she, it could be a he as well. Okay, thank you, Kwame. Yeah. And then the one thing commented, the organization you mentioned, you, Kwame, I have never heard of. Thank you. So those worldwide, the Uhuru organization, and the one based in America. So I already answered saying that we will put the names and their links in the comment section, and we are going to pin the petitions that you mentioned, the three petitions. But just allow me, before we close this session, to say that, for ordinary people, even without having a platform or anything, what we can do is each of us, trust me, each of us can be an ambassador or how can you say, an army towards the African unity, to have that Pan-Africanism. What we can do is, it has come probably a cliche. I like to say this in many sessions. What we can do is invest on the children, as Frederick Douglass said, educate the youth. I do believe that in educating the youth, the children, if we have children, teach the youth the youth are not going to get African education in school, let alone outside of Africa. Even in Africa, it's hard to get, Kwame, you might be a witness. I don't know how many of your history class in Ghana are celebrating Kwame Nkrumah. and same with me, celebrating Emperor Haile Selassie for who he was for Ethiopia. And for Africa, we have that problem, canceling of previous leaders who have done a great work. I mean, we might have differences, but not really. We don't celebrate them. This has been our history. So we need to teach the youth to think in a Pan-African way. From now on, like in the next 2 decades, 3 decades, if we really teach the youth, the children, our nephew, our niece, our the younger siblings, whatever we can within the family, just forget the organization being involved, but within our family itself, if we can change 1 or 2 person, especially the children, Africa will just be fine in the next few decades. I mean, we will raise children that think in a Pan-Africanism way, and will stand for themselves, wherever they are. So we can at least do that, beside all, our involvement and contribution in organization, which is also good. But on a day-to-day basis, we have works to do, teaching the youth. That is my message. It was really a very nice discussion. People were engaged. Thank you, all of you. I think we have called all of you at some point because of the comments and the questions you have been mentioning. And yeah, thank you. This will make us more energized, to grow from twice a week to maybe, on a daily basis, or 3 times a week, or 4 times a week, and to bring you, because it's trust us. I mean, the dynamic is something that we cannot even keep up on. It's crazy every day, every hour. It's a lot is happening. So we try to make a balance, to strike that balance. What could be better to bring to our audience? But as Kwame said, your support is important. You can get our email address on about us on the channel, so you can email to us. But we will also, in the near future, or very soon, we will have means that we will pin here, how you can support us. Thank you very much. But before we close, we want to say something. Our program on Thursday, the South China Sea. Perhaps, Kwame, I give it to you. And that's it from me.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone who was on the program. We are encouraged, and I'm happy that Mahlet, you said a lot of people attended today. They were commenting. It's very important, and so you should also forward this video to as many people as possible. Like we said, this is the only channel where issues concerning the African continent are digested in their entirety. We digest the African issues in their entirety without fear or favor. We are not populist. We are not a populist form of media that is looking for likes, simple likes, but we are here to contribute to the cause of the liberation of our continent and our people across the globe. So that is the very reason, because we are real people who are concerned about the condition of our continent and our people. That is the very reason why you should support us. That why you should contribute, however much, you have, whether it is $1 or $2 or $3, whatever you have, you should reach out through our email and contribute to that. And we are not only talking about these issues, but we are also on the ground working. We are working towards the objectives of realizing the efforts. We are putting in efforts towards the realization of that African unity. That is why we take time to diagnose these problems, because we are taking steps towards that side and the realization of a united Africa. We are not only speaking about it, like Mahlet said, on Thursday we will have a program. We want to reflect on the South China Sea. There is a lot of wrangle and happenings in the South China Sea. China came out the last 3 days to put up drills. It was demonstrating its capability of taking over Taiwan. Taiwan, of course, is an island which has belonged to China for a very long time, and internationally, it is recognized that Taiwan is part of China. And so there is provocations by the United States and the Western world within the South China Sea. So China is demonstrating that it will not allow that provocation and propping up Taiwan and sending it, weapons, like how they have been sending weapons to Taiwan. And so China is mentioning that it will not tolerate that behavior of the United States, which it is, the same behavior which it is exercising in Ukraine. China has said that it will not tolerate it, and it will either cut off Taiwan and block it off and take it by force, because it wanted to reintegrate Taiwan within China, peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to examine what effect does this, what are the implications of this, these events that are happening within the South China Sea. And so that will be our topic on Thursday. Thank you so much, Mahlet, and good night to everyone. I would like to say subscribe and share the channel with others. Share the video, and up to, if you know anyone who is working in the African Union, take the video and share with them. If you know anyone working in ECOWAS, take the video and share with them. If you know anyone working within the East African community, COMESA, Maghreb, all these regional organizations, SADC, take the video and share it with them. Or anyone working within the 6th region of the African diaspora, take it and share the video with them, because this that we are presenting is for all Africans on the continent and abroad. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kwame. So we will see you again. Thank you, CNS. She said, we appreciate your pragmatism and practically in addressing current matters on the continent and the world. Yes, as Kwame said, we are here. We give it to you like no other. We do it unapologetically. I mean, believe us, some of and many, I think, have framed us that we have a strong political view, but our interest is, it's all about Pan-Africanism. That is the only thing, and the unity of our continent globally for Africans at home and abroad. As long as it relates to that, we bring it to you and we share our view with you. And so bye-bye. We will see you again on Thursday night, 9 p.m. South African time, 10 p.m. Eastern African time, 7 p.m. Ghana time, and 8 p.m. Lagos time. So I try to mention as much as possible the main hours in the continent, but once we create the link, we will put most of the times in Africa. Bye-bye. Bye, Kwame. Thank you.